Hi, my name is Matt and I'd like to welcome you to this Zindiac video, which is part of our MSP 5th edition Foundation Training course. In this video, we'll be covering some key topics as an introduction to the MSP themes before we have a separate set of videos on each MSP theme. So in the exam, the MSP themes were 34 out of the 60 marks. That's 56.67%. So they're the bulk of the exam. So we really need to know them in detail. But before we get onto them, we need to cover some key documents and concepts. So we're going to do that in this video, starting with the program strategy. And we need to understand its purpose, which is to define the governance and control environment for a program in line with the corporate governance requirements of that investing organization, and to ensure that MSP principles are applied throughout the program lifecycle. So straight away, what that's doing is recognizing that your program doesn't exist in isolation. You're delivering your program on behalf of an organization or organizations, and they will have their corporate governance requirements. So very often we'll take a lot of those requirements as given into our program. We may need to tweak them a bit. It's rather similar to the changes made with Prince 2 between 5th edition and 6th edition, is recognizing that context of where the project sits or where the program sits, that we're not starting from scratch when we create our program strategy. In this instance, we are starting from a position of existing corporate governance requirements for the organizations we're delivering on behalf of. The program strategy answers two key questions: why a particular control is required and what steps are needed to comply. So why a particular control is required and what steps are needed to comply. And that makes it really clear. Why are we putting this? We're putting this control in place to ensure the program complies with GDPR. That's why. What are we doing? We are, and then we say what we're doing to comply with GDPR in that instance. Or why do we need this control? We need this control in place to ensure we don't overspend on our budget. What are the steps to comply? Well, the program manager needs to track how much we're spending. If we're spending over X amount, then it needs to be signed off by a higher level, by the senior responsible owner, and so on, those types of things. So why we've got a particular control and what the steps are in order to comply with that control. The program strategy should be a single document, and the section should be derived from the approach information specified in each theme. And as we go through each theme, we will see that we'll have and it's in the guidance manual, but also we will go through it in this course. So in each theme, we will go through the approach information for the program strategy. So for the organization theme, it defines the governance approach. For the design theme, defines the design approach. The justification theme defines the finance approach. The structure theme defines the delivery approach and how we start and manage and stop projects. And the knowledge assurance and decision themes define those approaches. So we'll have effectively a section for each theme, and the controls in place. And again, for each control, you'll have a why and a what. And it forms the governance baseline. The program strategy forms the governance baseline. Which brings us on nicely to program governance, and we can see straight away on the slide the definition of program governance, the framework of authority and accountability applied by the investing organisation to control the work and ensure the creation of value. And the key word there really is authority, and everyone in the organisation has a scope of control, and that scope of control is really defined by the authority they have, and particularly how much authority they have to spend money, direct resources on behalf of the organisation, and how much risk can they take on behalf of the organisation, and at what point do they need to go to a higher authority to get authority to have the right to spend more money, direct more resources, or take more risk. At what point does their authority stop? And that goes all the way up the organisation, even to the chief exec. At some point their authority ends and they have to go to the board, and at some point the board's authority ends and they have to go to the shareholders if we're a public limited company. If we're a governmental organisation, you'd kind of go up and you'd go to the government, to the executive, and then you might have to go to Parliament, and beyond that you might have to go to the people, to the citizens, if it was a big enough decision. So the purpose of programme governance. As part of this governance, the programme needs controls that provide transparency and engender confidence that activities will happen as expected. And that transparency is very important, that we're not seen to be hiding anything. If people perceive that we're hiding information, covering things up, then that will make people suspicious and they'll become anxious and nervous, and that's not a good thing. So we want to be transparent and engender confidence. Controls may be policies, processes, tools, and or behaviours. Yeah, so control, when they talk about control, if they refer to control in the exam, it's very broad definition of what a control is. The MSP themes describe essential aspects of governance required to ensure that the programme is aligned with the principles across the programme lifecycle. Collectively, application of the themes establishes the control environment for the programme. So that's the reason we're talking about this before we go into the themes, is to make sure you understand that is what the themes are trying to do is control. That's the key word. How do we, as program manager, control the program? I've spoken before, the program is the organization's going on a journey. You're the program manager, you're leading the organization on that journey. How do you maintain control? That's the key thing. The themes are there to help you, to guide you, and help you keep control of the program. We're now going to look at the purpose of program plans, which is to define the specific arrangements for implementing the program strategy and for directing the team. Program plans answer the more detailed questions of who, when, and how in order to deliver the outcomes of benefit over time. So remember, the program strategy defines the why and the what, but the program plans go more detail and they define the who, when, and how. So that's a really good thing to remember for the exam, but also obviously when you're actually running your program. Organizations may use a single or separate documents with independent change control. A plan is not required for every approach, as in some scenarios the approach will be sufficient. And that's an important point to remember for the exam as well. You don't need a plan for every approach. They form the management baseline. So we've got the governance baseline is the program strategy, the program plans are the management baseline. And finally, before we move on to the themes themselves, we're just going to remind you of the plan, do, check, act cycle, sometimes known as the Deming cycle. If you've done ITIL, certainly ITIL version 3, we'll have come across this before, and it's a very high level abstraction of what we do in business. It was created by Deming, who was a management consultant in the 1970s as part of a framework that he created. So it's just one aspect of that. I think it's fairly straightforward. I feel when they were building pyramids, they were using something similar to this. We're going to plan what we're going to do. We're going to actually do it. We're going to check the results, and then we're going to act on those results in terms of changing what we do going forward. So plan, understanding the current situation clearly, and at that step, we establish risk tolerances to express the risk appetite. So establishing risk tolerances to express the risk appetite. So the way they're doing that is we have a risk tolerance. We're prepared to spend, the budget's £100,000. The risk tolerance on that is, say, 10%. Might be a bit high, but 10%, it's £10,000. So that's the risk appetite. The risk appetite, we're prepared to accept. That's the amount of risk we're prepared. We're not prepared to accept more risk. So if we think we're going to go over £110,000, or the other way as well, it might be below. If we were going to spend less than £90,000, then that's beyond our risk appetite. We think spending too much would be too risky. The business justification wouldn't be there. But equally, if we don't spend enough, we maybe feel that the quality of the delivery of the program would suffer. So we don't want to do that either. So we need to be between 90 and 110. That's our risk appetite expressed as risk tolerances, and that is important for the exam. Do specific steps required are performed, and we're identifying, prioritizing, and responding to risk. So in the plan, we're setting up our risk appetite. In the do, we're actually identifying and prioritizing and responding to risks. Check. Validating results from do, and if not as expected, identifying if further action is needed. So that's where we're understanding the effectiveness of the resolution of an issue. So where a risk, hopefully where a risk, so we've predicted it, but we thought something might happen. There was some uncertainty. There was a threat that something bad might happen, and issues occurred. So either a threat has happened and it's a bad issue, or it could be positive. It could have been an opportunity and it's an issue which is going to be positive. But either way, we look to resolve it, reduce the impact of a threat, any negatives, and increase the impact of any positives. And then finally, act. Validated actions are applied in practice. So continual improvement happens when plans and initial actions are reviewed and revised to reflect the current priorities and situation. And we go around that loop. So it's really, for the exam, you just need to be able to recognise the plan, do, check, act, and what we do in each area. So it's fairly straightforward. Expressing risk appetite, responding to risks, understanding the effectiveness of resolution of an issue, and then continual improvement in the act. So that brings us to the end of this kind of theme introduction section, or some points that we need to know before we look at the themes in detail. Please join me in the next video where we'll be looking at the organisation theme. Until then, until you see me again, have a great day.